The sun had barely slipped below the red-stained cliffs of northern Arizona when the wind began to rise first as a restless whisper, then as a howl sharp enough to slice through canvas and bone. Miriam Blake, frontier herbalist and stubborn believer in her own self-reliance, felt the shift in the air while she was still sorting the day's gathered sage and wild chamomile. She paused, narrowing her eyes at the horizon. What she saw made her throat tighten. A dust wall. A massive one. It rose like a living beast, its body stretching for miles, its head crowned with the swirling fury of sand and grit. The ranchers called it a red ghost, the kind of storm that stole breath, blinded horses, and stripped the skin from anyone foolish enough to stand in its path. Miriam had weathered small storms before. This was not small. She lunged for her canvas satchel, trying to tie the straps closed before the wind could snatch anything. But the gusts grew violent, whipping her hair across her face and slamming against her legs. A metal basin rattled, then flew across the rocky ground. Her tent-side table toppled, scattering herbs into the rising chaos. "Not now, please. Not now," she muttered, though she knew the storm didn't negotiate. The first wave hit her like thrown gravel. She ducked, shielding her face, but the dust infiltrated everything: nose, eyes, mouth. She coughed hard, tasting grit and copper. Another blast struck her cheek so sharply she stumbled. She needed to reach her horse. Needed to reach cover. But every direction looked like shifting red smoke. Then she inhaled at the wrong moment. Dust poured down her throat like ground glass dots. She gagged, clawing at her neck. The air suddenly seemed to thin, and a cold panic seized her chest. She dropped to her knees, coughing uncontrollably as her lungs rebelled. Her vision blurred. She tried to crawl, but the storm swallowed her whole, reducing the world to stinging wind and the muffled roar of nature unchained. Somewhere in the storm, a horse whinnied. Hoofbeats pounded through the blinding haze. A silhouette emerged, a rider cutting through the choking red as if the storm parted for him alone. Miriam squinted, tears streaking through the dirt on her cheeks, but her eyes could barely make out the painted markings on the man's face. She recognized him only by legend. Tatsi, the Apache scout who kept to the high mesas and rarely ventured near settlements. The story said he was part shadow, part warrior, shaped by the land itself. But right now, he was the only solid thing in a world dissolving to dust. He dismounted in one fluid motion, boots hitting the ground with practiced certainty, and knelt beside her. His voice cut through the storm calm, firm, utterly unshaken. "Don't breathe the dust. Cover your mouth." She couldn't. She couldn't breathe at all. She shook her head desperately, fingers trembling as she tried to gesture toward her throat. The coughing had turned into a horrible rasping wheeze. She felt lightheaded, darkness edging her vision. Tatsi's gaze sharpened, and he reached for the waterskin at his belt. "Here," he said, leaning close so the wind couldn't steal his words. "Drink." Her mouth opened, cracked and bleeding from the storm's assault. She tried to force out sound but could barely whisper. "Put it in my mouth, please." He steadied her head with one strong hand and tilted the waterskin. The first drops hit her tongue and felt like heaven, cool, clean, soothing the tearing burn in her throat. She swallowed greedily, coughing again, but the water helped. Gave her enough breath to cling to life. Tatsi didn't wait for her to recover. He lifted her into his arms light to him despite her frantic grip on his shirt and stood against the roaring wind. Each step he took was deliberate, angled, as if he knew exactly how storms moved and where their strongest teeth bit. Miriam clung to him, half conscious, hearing only the pounding of his heart and the unending roar of dust around them. She didn't know where he was taking her, didn't know why he had stopped for her. All she knew was that she was no longer alone in the storm, and that the man carrying her moved with the assurance of someone who had spent his whole life surviving nature's wrath. When they slipped into the narrow mouth of a hidden canyon, the wind suddenly broke, muffled by stone. Shade swallowed them. Silence returned heavy, strange. Blessed. The last thing Miriam saw before darkness finally claimed her was the scout's steady face as he laid her carefully against the sheltered rock wall. He had saved her breath, and he didn't yet know the terrible price he would pay for it. Miriam woke slowly, surfacing from darkness like someone rising from deep water. Her chest still felt tight, her throat raw, but she could breathe. Real, clean, merciful air. She blinked, disoriented, until the dim outline of a stone overhang sharpened above her. The air smelled faintly of juniper and cool earth. The storm was gone, or rather she was hidden from it. For a moment she didn't know where she was. Then she heard movement, quiet, precise, intentional. She turned her head and saw him. Tatsi sat a few feet away, tending a small fire that barely smoked, its flames carefully shielded by stacked stones. He was sharpening a knife, but not for show. Every stroke was methodical, purposeful. The man radiated calm in the way a mountain did, silent, unmoving, but full of hidden stories carved by time. When he noticed she was awake, he set the blade aside. "You breathe easier now?" he said. It wasn't a question. She swallowed and winced as her throat protested. "Thanks to you," she rasped. Her voice sounded like it had been dragged through gravel. Where are we?" "A canyon off the main trail," he replied. "Scouts use it when a storm or enemy patrol blocks the open land. Few people know it exists." "You brought me to a secret place," she said softly, the weight of that dawning on her. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he handed her a clay cup of warm water infused with something aromatic, pine needles. "Mint?" she sipped carefully. The warmth slid down her throat, soothing the abrasion left by the storm. "You were choking," Tatsi finally said. "You needed shelter before the dust reached your lungs completely." She nodded weakly. "You saved my life." Another pause. He didn't seem like a man who took praise easily or wanted it. "The storm would have killed anyone caught in the open," he said simply. She pulled the blanket he'd given her tighter around her shoulders. Only then did she realize her boots were off, her coat neatly folded beside her, her hair untangled from the mess it had become. He had tended to her while she was unconscious. The thought stirred something uneasy and grateful all at once. "Were you already nearby?" she asked. "Or did you find me?" "I saw your camp from the ridge," he answered. "The wind was rising. I knew the storm would break hard. By the time I reached you, you had already taken in too much dust." She shivered. "If you'd come even a minute later." He looked away, jaw tightening. "You should not be alone in weather like this." She almost laughed, hoarse, tired, but real. "I know that now." Outside, the storm still roared faintly, muffled by the twist of stone that concealed their refuge. The canyon opened behind them into a narrow passage just wide enough for one horse. His mare stood there, calm and watchful, as if she too understood the sanctity of the hidden place. Miriam wiped dust from her eyes. "I didn't know a canyon was here at all. I've collected herbs in this region for months. You would not find it unless someone showed you," he said. "And no one should have." His gaze darkened slightly. Not hostile, wary. Then she understood. Bringing me here was against some rule, wasn't it? His silence told her everything. Her stomach tightened. "Will you get in trouble?" He didn't move, didn't blink, but something in the air shifted like a taut thread pulled thinner. "This place is for scouts," he finally said. "For our people, not outsiders." She lowered her eyes. "And you still brought me here." "You were dying," he answered quietly. There was no time to think of rules. The fire crackled softly. Miriam studied him, broad-shouldered, patient, alert even at rest. But behind that calmness was something else. a heaviness in the way he held himself, as if he always expected danger to come from behind. "You carry something," she murmured before she could stop herself. "Something heavy." His eyes flicked to her, sharp and unreadable. "You talk much for someone who should rest," he said. But his tone wasn't unkind, just guarded. She smiled a little. "I talk when I'm worried about the man who saved my life paying for it." He didn't answer. Outside, the wind began to die, dropping from a shriek to a distant moan. Miriam lay back, exhaustion pulling at her limbs. Tatsi rose and checked the narrow canyon entrance, scanning the sky with trained eyes. "Storm is moving east," he said. "When it clears, I will take you home." A simple statement. Yet he said it like a promise. Miriam closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the fire seep into her bones. For now, she was safe. But she sensed deep in her chest that sheltering in this hidden canyon had consequences neither of them yet understood. Dot and Tatsi already feared the price. Miriam slept in fits, waking every so often to the rough scrape of wind echoing through the canyon. Each time, her throat burned worse. The relief from Tatsi's water earlier had helped her survive, but the dust storm had reached deeper than she realized. Her lungs felt heavy, as if she'd breathed in the desert itself. By dawn, a pale slice of light crept down the canyon wall. Tatsi stirred the fire back to life and ground something between his palms, pine needles, maybe, or bark. His movements were quiet but purposeful. He had the kind of discipline that came from years of riding alone through dangerous land. Miriam tried to sit up. The effort sent a stabbing cough through her chest. She doubled over, struggling to breathe. Tatsi was beside her instantly. "You should not move," he said, placing a steadying hand on her back. "I can't." She gasped for breath. "My chest. It's worse." He listened to her breathing with the tense focus of someone who knew exactly what was happening and feared it. "The dust is deep in your lungs. It will grow worse before it grows better." Her coughing fit intensified, her throat closing like a fist. Panic rushed through her. She clutched at his shirt, trying to force air through her tightening lungs. "Tatsi, please." Her voice broke into wheezing. He hesitated only a moment before reaching to his belt. His hand hovered over a small, buckskin pouch tied with braided sinew. It was worn, carefully tended, and clearly treasured. Something about the way he touched it, slowly, almost reverently, told her it was not just medicine. It was something sacred. He exhaled heavily, struggling with a decision she didn't yet understand. "Tatsi." She rasped, sweat beading on her forehead. "I can't breathe." His jaw tightened. He untied the pouch. Inside was a small bundle of dried root, knotted, reddish-brown, smelling faintly of earth after rain. When he unwrapped it, Miriam felt strangely, inexplicably, like she was seeing something she wasn't meant to. "What? What is that?" she whispered. "It is called yada," he said quietly. "It eases the lungs, clears the breath." Then, almost reluctantly, "It is not meant for outsiders." Her chest constricted again. She pressed a trembling hand to her throat, barely able to speak. "Tatsi, please put it in my mouth." "I can't." Her breathing hitched so sharply that fear flickered across his face, real fear, brief but unmistakable. It made him move. He broke off a small piece of the root and knelt beside her. "Chew slowly," he instructed, placing it gently against her lips. The moment the root touched her tongue, a coolness spread down her throat, soothing the sharp burn. She bit down, and a bitter, earthy taste filled her mouth. Her lungs loosened. Her breath deepened. She sagged with relief, tears streaking down her dusty cheeks. "It works," she whispered hoarsely. "It really works." Tatsi looked away, his expression troubled instead of relieved. "You should rest," he said. "Let the medicine do its work." But something else weighed heavily on him. something that wasn't about her. Miriam watched him tie the pouch closed with deliberate care and return it to his belt. He handled it like one would handle a relic passed down through generations. "You didn't want to give that to me," she said quietly. He didn't deny it. "It belongs to my people," he said. "It is not shared outside the tribe. Doing so is forbidden." A chill crept through her, slow and unwelcome. "Forbidden? As in? You'll be punished?" He stared into the fire as if it held answers. "The root is considered sacred. It is given only in certain ceremonies. To offer it to someone who is not Apache breaks old rules, but you saved my life with it. That does not matter." His voice was calm, but underneath it lay resignation. "So what happens," Miriam pressed, "if someone finds out you gave it to me?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched between them, thick as the dust in her lungs. "Tatsi? Please, tell me." Finally, he spoke. "Giving the sacred root to an outsider is seen as betraying our traditions." His eyes met hers, dark, steady, but shadowed. "It can lead to punishment. Or exile." Miriam felt the blood drain from her face. The medicine she'd begged for, the very thing keeping her alive, might cost him everything. "Tatsi," she whispered, throat tightening with emotion instead of dust. "I never wanted." A distant sound cut her off. Hoofbeats, several, moving fast. Tatsi's head snapped toward the canyon entrance, every muscle going taut. "They are coming," he said. "Who?" Miriam whispered, dread curling in her stomach. He didn't need to answer. The scouts. His people. And he had just committed a forbidden act right under their eyes. The hoofbeats came closer, echoing sharply against the stone walls of the hidden canyon. Miriam froze, heart hammering in her chest. She could see Tatsi tense beside her, his hands moving almost imperceptibly toward the bow slung over his back. Every instinct of his life, every lesson learned on the harsh mesas, every narrow escape was now focused on the sound of approaching danger. "They know," he muttered under his breath, eyes scanning the canyon mouth. "They always know." Miriam clutched the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her breathing had barely returned to normal, yet now her chest tightened again, not from dust, but from fear. Who's coming?" she asked. Tatsi's jaw tightened. "Scouts, my people. The Council of Warriors." Her stomach dropped. Why? Why would they come here? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at the small pouch tied to his belt, the one she had begged him to share, the sacred root that had saved her life. The weight of it in her mind grew heavier with every second. "They'll accuse me," he said finally, voice low, almost bitter. "Accuse me of sharing sacred medicine with an outsider. And that can mean exile. Or worse." Miriam's eyes widened. She swallowed hard. "You risked your life to save me?" Tatsi's gaze didn't leave the canyon mouth. "You would have died if I hadn't," he said quietly. "I could not leave you there. I do not make that choice lightly." The first scout appeared at the canyon entrance, silhouetted against the early morning light. More followed, a tight line of men and women moving with the precision of those who had lived and died by strict codes. Their expressions were unreadable, but Miriam could feel the tension radiating from them like heat off the desert stones. The lead scout, a stern-faced man with graying hair, dismounted and stepped forward, eyes fixed on Tatsi. "Tatsi," he called, voice sharp, carrying across the canyon. "We know what you have done." Tatsi stood slowly, every movement measured, controlled. "I did what I had to do," he said. "No one else would have survived that storm." The scout's eyes narrowed. "The sacred root is not yours to give. You've broken the laws of the tribe. You will answer before the council." Miriam's breath caught in her throat. She had survived the storm because of Tatsi, Yet she now realized that her very survival had placed him in mortal danger. Guilt and fear twisted inside her chest. I saved her life," Tatsi continued, standing tall despite the rising tension. "If anyone is to blame, it is the storm itself, and the land that allows such fury." The lead scout shook his head. "Rules are rules, Tatsi. You know this. You must come with us." Miriam moved a step forward instinctively. "Wait," she called. Her voice, though weak, carried across the canyon. "Please hear me." The scouts paused, surprised by the sudden intrusion. Tatsi's head turned sharply, and their eyes met. She could see the question in his gaze. "What are you doing?" I was there," she said, voice shaking. "I was caught in the storm. I would have died without him. The root, he gave it to me because I could not breathe, because he saved my life. He did what he had to do. I can tell you this. He did not betray his people intentionally." Murmurs rippled through the small group of scouts. A few glanced at each other, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. But the lead scout's expression hardened. "Your testimony is noted, outsider, but it does not absolve him. He still broke sacred law. You cannot undo that." Tatsi's jaw tightened. He looked at Miriam, the weight of the storm, the root, and his people pressing down on him all at once. He had always lived with consequences, always accepted the cost of every action. But this was different. "This will not be easy," he muttered, almost to himself. "Even if they listen to you, my fate is not mine alone to decide." Miriam stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. It was a small gesture, but one of solidarity, of courage born from desperation. "Then I will stand with you," she said firmly. "I will tell the truth. I will not let them punish you for saving me." Tatsi's eyes softened briefly, a flicker of gratitude crossing his sharp features. Yet even as he looked toward the canyon entrance, he could see the path ahead was fraught with peril. Breaking the rules had saved her life, but now it threatened everything he had fought to protect: his honor, his place among his people, and the life he had carved out for himself in the harsh desert lands. And Miriam understood, deep in her heart, that the storm that had almost taken her life had also cast a shadow over the man who had saved her. A price was coming, and neither of them could escape it. The ride back toward the Apache village was tense and silent. Miriam clung to the back of Tatsi's horse, still weak but determined. Her throat burned from the storm, yet her mind raced faster than her lungs could keep pace. Every mile closer to the council meeting felt heavier with the knowledge that the man who had saved her life now faced a fate he could not control. Tatsi rode steadily, eyes scanning the horizon. The desert stretched around them, red cliffs and jagged rock formations rising like ancient sentinels. Miriam tried to summon courage, her fingers gripping the coarse leather of the saddle. "Tatsi," she said, voice hoarse, "they can't. They can't just punish you for trying to save me. There has to be a way to explain it." He shook his head slowly. "It is not that simple," he said. "The Council of Warriors follows rules older than any living man. Even truth can be twisted." Miriam's stomach sank. "Twisted? How?" Tatsi's eyes darkened as he spoke. "There are men who would see me fall, not because I have sinned, but because they fear what I have become. Some wish to take my place. Others, like Koso, see me as a rival to their influence. If they convince the council I acted without honor, I could lose everything. My name, my tribe, my home." Miriam felt a wave of anger and fear crash over her. How could someone so brave, so loyal, be cornered by those who thrived on manipulation and deceit? She tightened her grip on the saddle. "Then I will not let that happen. You did not bring me here to die. You saved me. Now I will help save you." Tatsi's eyes met hers, flicking with surprise and a faint glimmer of respect. You do not yet understand the stakes, he said, voice quiet but firm. The council does not take kindly to outsiders interfering in tribal matters. Even your presence here may worsen my case. I do not care, Miriam said. I have witnessed the truth. I can speak of it. I can tell them everything. How you found me, how you saved me, how. She broke off, coughing into her hand, still weak but resolute. How you acted with honor when no one else would. Tatsi considered her, a flicker of something rare passing across his stoic features. Hope. If you speak for me, he said slowly, you must speak with clarity, with courage, and you must be ready for resistance. Miriam nodded. I am ready. The canyon mouth opened to the desert plains, and soon they reached the outskirts of the village. Apache warriors on lookout spotted them immediately. A few mounted scouts rode toward Tatsi, stopping short with disciplined respect. Their faces were wary, some curious, others skeptical. The lead scout from before, the one who had confronted him at the canyon, now rode up to meet them. His expression was unreadable as he assessed Miriam's presence. Tatsi, the scout said, this is unexpected. This is necessary, Tatsi replied, keeping his tone steady. She must tell the truth. Miriam dismounted, wobbling slightly but keeping her balance. Her boots sank into the sandy soil as she approached the assembly of warriors. I will speak, she said clearly, despite the dry scratch in her throat. I was caught in the storm. My life was in danger. Tatsi brought me here, gave me water, and saved me from dying. Whispers rippled through the warriors. Some looked to each other, doubt and curiosity mingling in their expressions. Miriam felt her pulse racing. She had stepped into a world she barely understood. Yet she knew that honesty, sheer honesty, was all she had. You risked your life for me, she continued, turning her gaze to Tatsi, and in doing so, you followed your heart and your honor, not your fear, not the words of rivals. You acted as a true warrior should. Tatsi's lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes glimmering with a mixture of pride and apprehension. The scouts and elders whispered among themselves, weighing the woman's testimony against years of strict tradition and long-standing rivalries. Miriam knew the path ahead was dangerous. There were those who would see Tatsi punished regardless of the truth. But she had made a choice. She would not allow the man, who had risked everything to save her, to fall without a fight. And as the wind picked up across the open plains, carrying the faint scent of sage and dust, Miriam realized something profound. She was no longer just a survivor of a storm. She had become a participant in Tatsi's life, bound by trust, courage, and an unspoken debt that she intended to honor, no matter the cost. The council of warriors sat in a semicircle of polished stone, the desert wind whispering through the tall pines around the ceremonial clearing. Tatsi stood in the center, upright and composed, but the weight of expectation pressed down on him like the summer sun at high noon. Miriam followed closely behind, her hands clenched at her sides, heart hammering. This was no ordinary assembly. It was a tribunal of honor, a place where rules older than anyone present would decide a man's fate. The elders' faces were impassive, yet Miriam could feel their scrutiny slice through the air. Some were old enough to remember the battles of a generation ago. Others were fierce warriors whose judgment could mean exile or worse. And at the front, Koso, the rival scout, watched with a cold, calculating glare. He was ready to see Tatsi punished and perhaps destroyed. The lead elder, a man with streaks of white hair and eyes like chipped obsidian, spoke first. Tatsi, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the clearing, you are accused of giving the sacred Yada root to one outside our people. You have broken the laws of our tribe and betrayed the trust of your forebears. How do you answer? Tatsi inhaled slowly, steadying himself. I did what I had to do, he said, voice firm. The woman was caught in a storm. She could not breathe. Her life was in immediate danger. I gave her the root to save her. Nothing more. A murmur ran through the council. One elder leaned forward, scrutinizing him. Rules are rules, Tatsi. You know this. Sacred medicine is not shared with outsiders. You have violated tradition. Miriam stepped forward. The elders turned to her, surprise flickering in their eyes. Tatsi's head snapped slightly, as if to silently ask, "Are you certain?" She swallowed, forcing her voice steady. "I speak the truth," she said. "I was in the storm. My throat filled with dust, my lungs burning. I would have died if Tatsi had not come for me. He gave me the root because he had no other choice. He acted out of necessity and honor, not disrespect." The council was silent for a moment. Even Koso's lips tightened, his eyes narrowing. Miriam held her ground, her voice unwavering. "If anyone is to blame, it is the storm, not Tatsi. He saved a life, and he did so with courage. If you punish him for this, you punish justice itself." A younger warrior shifted, whispering to the elder beside him. Another frowned, exchanging glances. The room was filled with tension, the air thick with the scent of pine smoke from ceremonial fires. For a brief moment, the balance of power seemed to teeter on the edge of Miriam's words. The lead elder's gaze softened slightly, though his expression remained stern. "And what of the accusation that this act was done deliberately to flaunt our laws?" He asked Miriam. "I have seen nothing but integrity in Tatsi," she replied. "He did not act for gain or recognition. He acted to save a life. That is all. He did what any honorable man would have done if faced with the same choice." Koso's jaw clenched, and he stepped forward, voice rising. "An outsider cannot dictate our rules. This woman's words do not absolve him. He has brought shame upon our traditions." Tatsi's eyes narrowed, but he did not raise his voice. Instead, he addressed the council, his tone calm but forceful. "Shame is not in saving life. Shame is in letting fear and rivalry dictate actions that harm others. I did what the council itself would have done if faced with the same circumstances." The elders conferred quietly, speaking in low tones. Miriam watched, heart pounding. Every second dragged, each glance from the council cutting deeper than the last. She knew that Koso had allies, men who wanted Tatsi removed for their own advantage. The risk was real, but she had spoken the truth loud, clear, undeniable. Finally, the lead elder raised a hand. Silence fell. "Tatsi has admitted to breaking tradition," he said slowly, measured, "but the circumstances are grave. A life was saved, and the witness confirms the truth of his actions. Therefore, he shall not be punished with exile or dishonor. Let it be known that courage and honor, when exercised in the face of danger, may bend the rules but never break the spirit of the law." Murmurs of agreement spread through the council, though Koso's scowl remained. Tatsi exhaled softly, tension leaving his body in small increments. He cast a glance at Miriam, a look of gratitude, fierce and unspoken. Miriam, still trembling from the intensity of the hearing, finally allowed herself a small sigh of relief. The storm had tested more than her lungs. It had tested the very bonds of trust, loyalty, and courage between two people brought together by fate. Yet even as Tatsi's honor was restored, Miriam could feel the shadow of the rival scout lingering. This victory was not the end. It was a fragile moment, earned through bravery, truth, and the delicate courage of standing by the man who had saved her life. And in that moment, she understood the storm had brought them together. But surviving it had required more than strength. It required trust, honesty, and an unwavering willingness to face danger for another's sake. lesson both she and Tatsi would carry far beyond that canyon clearing. The council of warriors had dispersed for the night, but the tension from the day lingered like the desert heat. Tatsi and Miriam returned to the small campsite on the outskirts of the village, the fire crackling faintly as shadows danced across the rocks. Though Tatsi's honor had been officially restored, a new threat lingered. Koso. His eyes were everywhere, his influence subtle but unmistakable. And both of them knew the rival scout would not give up easily. Miriam pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders, feeling the exhaustion of the past days settle into her bones. "You did well today," she said softly, her voice still hoarse from speaking before the council. "You were brave and honorable. But—" she hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I think Koso will try something next." Tatsi nodded, his expression hardening. "He will. He wants my position. My reputation. He will not stop until he has it." He walked to the edge of the firelight, scanning the shadows of the canyon as if expecting an ambush. "He is clever, and he hides well. But cleverness can be exposed." Miriam's curiosity rose, mingled with concern. "How?" she asked. Tazhi knelt by the fire and retrieved a small bundle of dried herbs and roots. "These are used to mark paths, to leave traces," he explained. "Signs that are invisible to the untrained eye, but can reveal the truth when observed carefully. I suspect Koso has been spreading lies, manipulating whispers to turn the council against me. If we watch closely, we can see the evidence of his treachery." Her pulse quickened. "So we catch him in the act?" "Yes," Tatsi replied, "and the council will see the truth. But it requires patience, vigilance. One mistake and he may disappear again, leaving lies in his wake." That night, they took shifts near the main trail leading from the village, hidden among boulders and scrub. Miriam, though still recovering from the storm, insisted on staying awake, watching alongside Tatsi, her eyes, trained from days of survival in harsh landscapes, caught movement others might have missed, a faint figure moving between rocks, shadows stretching unnaturally against the rising moon. "Do you see him?" she whispered. Tazhi squinted, then nodded. "Koso," he said quietly. "He is here, trying to tamper with the council's record symbols that record deeds and decisions. If he succeeds, my actions could be twisted into defiance." Miriam's heart pounded. "We can't let him do that." Tatsi moved silently, a shadow among shadows, and she followed his lead. They approached carefully, not a word passing between them. Koso crouched near a series of etched stones, arranging symbols in a way that would mislead anyone reviewing them in the morning. "Now?" Tatsi whispered. He stepped forward, the rustle of his leather boots startling Koso. The rival scout spun around, eyes wide in recognition and fear. "Caught," Tatsi said, his tone low but unwavering. Koso reached for a knife, but Tatsi was faster. In a fluid motion, he disarmed the man and pinned him against the rock. Miriam held the firelight steady on them, illuminating the truth for anyone who might arrive. "You have been spreading lies," Tatsi said, voice hard, "trying to punish me for actions born of necessity. For personal gain, you would risk dishonor and the lives of others." Koso's face twisted in anger, but the evidence lay clear, the symbols on the stones. The subtle traces only Tatsi's trained eye could interpret, all revealed his deceit. Miriam stepped closer, her voice strong. "The council must see this. This is proof of his schemes, not Tatsi's wrongdoing." Tatsi released Koso, letting him see the firelight fully. "Tomorrow," he said, "the truth will be undeniable. You cannot hide from it now." Koso glared, but knew resistance was futile. He retreated into the shadows, leaving the marked stones behind. Miriam exhaled, her hands shaking with adrenaline and relief. "We did it," she whispered. The council will know the truth." Tatsi looked at her, eyes softening for the first time since the storm. "And you," he said quietly, "help save me again. Not with medicine this time, but with courage. You stood by me when others would have faltered." Miriam's cheeks warmed. "I told you," she said, "I will not let you fall." The night settled around them once more, quiet now, yet heavy with promise. They knew that the next day would bring the council's judgment, but for the first time since the storm, hope flickered in their hearts. The truth was clear, and no amount of fear or deceit could erase it. Dawn broke over the desert, spilling gold and rose across the cliffs, painting the Apache village in light and shadow. The council of warriors gathered once more in the ceremonial clearing. This time, there was no tension born of uncertainty. The evidence of Koso's treachery had been laid bare, visible to all. Miriam stood beside Tatsi, her presence now a symbol of truth, courage, and unwavering loyalty. The lead elder spoke first, his voice firm and resolute. Yesterday, Tatsi was accused of breaking the sacred laws by giving the yada root to an outsider. Today, we have seen the truth. Koso's deception has been uncovered. The council recognizes that Tatsi acted with honor, out of necessity, and with courage. The life of the woman he saved confirms this. Murmurs of agreement spread through the clearing. The tension that had threatened to suffocate the assembly lifted, replaced by a sense of relief and vindication. Even the younger warriors, who had whispered doubt the day before, now nodded in respect. Tatsi's gaze met Miriam's. Dark eyes softened by gratitude and something deeper, an unspoken acknowledgement that went beyond words. He inclined his head toward her. "You stood by me," he said quietly. "When many would have turned away, you spoke truth. You saved me, just as I saved you." Miriam smiled, despite the lingering exhaustion from the storm and the night's vigilance. "We saved each other," she said. "I only did what I could." The lead elder continued. "Koso, your actions have endangered the tribe and sought to harm a man of honor. You will be disciplined according to our laws and held accountable for your deceit. Let this serve as a lesson to all who would manipulate truth for personal gain." Koso's face flushed with anger and shame. He had been exposed, defeated by both evidence and witness. There was no room for his lies now, and the council's judgment was final. Tatsi exhaled slowly, the weight that had pressed on his shoulders for days finally lifting. Yet he knew the events had exacted a cost. Giving the sacred root, though necessary, had put him at risk of severe punishment. And though he had been vindicated, the memory of that risk, the storm, the near death, the confrontation with Koso would not fade easily. Miriam placed her hand on his arm. "You survived," she said softly. "And so did I that storm, that danger. It brought us together, and it proved that courage matters more than fear." He studied her hand on his arm, a rare, tender smile flickering across his face. "You have changed my path," he admitted quietly. "Not through force, but through loyalty, honesty, and bravery. I owe you more than words can ever convey." She shook her head, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "You only did what was right. That is the debt we owe to each other." The village slowly returned to its rhythm, the elders retreating, warriors resuming their duties, and life in the desert continuing with its harsh beauty. Yet for Tatsi and Miriam, something profound had shifted. They had faced not just a storm of nature, but a storm of human ambition and fear. And they had survived both, dashed together. As the sun climbed higher, Tatsi led Miriam toward the hidden canyon where their story had begun. The cliffs and stones bore witness to the trials they had endured. Here, in this quiet sacred place, he turned to her. "Miriam," he said, voice low and earnest, "the storm took nothing from us, but it demanded we trust each other completely. And now I see that life is richer when shared with someone who stands unwavering at your side." Her eyes glistened with emotion. "I trust you, Tatsi, in every way." A smile softened his rugged features, and for a moment, the world beyond the canyon, the tribe, the council, the dangers felt distant. They were simply two people, survivors of storms both literal and figurative, who had discovered strength, courage, and connection in each other. The price had been real, the risk to Tatsi, the confrontation with Koso, the exposure of traditions, but the reward was equally profound. Life, honor, and the bond forged in the crucible of danger and truth. They stood together at the canyon's edge, the desert stretching infinitely before them. Tatsi took her hand, and for the first time since the storm, there was no fear, only certainty. Whatever trials might come next, they would face them as one. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying dust and sunlight, a testament to survival, courage, and the undeniable truth that even in the harshest lands, honor and love could prevail. And in that moment, both of them understood. The terrible price they had feared was nothing compared to the value of life saved, truth revealed, and trust earned.